Good morning, everyone. Another Rollo Devo on this fine morning, although the thunder over my head makes it seem like it might rain in a few minutes, so I should probably get this over with. We're in Genesis 41 again this morning. We're going to look at verses 1 to 14 this morning. Remember, yesterday we looked at the end of the chapter and saw that this episode is not Joseph's rise to power as the big payoff for all of his trials earlier on. Joseph doesn't even view it that way. He still knows that he's a slave, even as second command in Egypt, and his heart is not in Egypt. His heart is in the promised land where God's people are meant to dwell. That's where he wants to be. So we're going to read a little bit more now, but at the beginning of this episode. I'm going to start in verse 1 and read pretty selectively until verse 14. After 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed. So he has the dreams. You guys probably remember them. Skinny cows eating up plump cows, blighted corn eating up plump corn, and he has no clue how to interpret these dreams. So verse 8. So in the morning his spirit was troubled, and he called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses today. And the cupbearer tells Pharaoh about how Joseph interpreted his and the baker's dreams, and it was exactly right. So Pharaoh goes, for this happens in verse 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph. Many of you have probably seen the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Rings movie. And if you have seen it, you probably remember the conversation between Frodo and Gandalf in the very beginning. Frodo meets Gandalf on the road as he's headed towards Bilbo's 11th birthday party, and he tells Gandalf, jokingly of course, scolding him, that he's late. To which Gandalf responds, A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins. Neither is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to. I think that conversation is not in the book. Last time I read it, I don't remember reading that. But it's still a good one anyways, and it makes a good point. A wizard arrives as precisely when he means to. I bet here, at the end of the last chapter, as Joseph watched the cupbearer leave and go back to Pharaoh's court, he probably thought, Finally, God, this is my moment. You've helped me to endure for so long, and now you're getting me out of this. Then he waits. And he waits. And he waits. And nothing. The cupbearer has forgotten about Joseph for 2 whole years. Now, I'm pretty sure that Joseph got very discouraged during that time. I bet even more discouraged than he ever had been before. He was still faithful. We know that. Yet at the same time, he probably was wondering, God, this was my chance. What happened? How long do I have to wait? We might wonder why God would allow the cupbearer to forget about Joseph. And that would be a good question to ask. But think about the story and what would have happened if the cupbearer had remembered Joseph right away. If the cupbearer had remembered Joseph right when he went back to Pharaoh's court, then Pharaoh might have pardoned Joseph and allowed him to go free. If that had happened, then 2 years later, when Pharaoh needed someone to interpret his dreams, Joseph would have been long gone and unable to be found. No one would interpret Pharaoh's dreams. A large portion of civilization would die. The family of Jacob would die. The family line of Jesus would die. You see, God was working through the forgetfulness of the cupbearer to make sure that Joseph was in the place Pharaoh could find him at the exact right time that he needed him. He wasn't late, but he wasn't early either. Joseph probably was wondering what God was doing. We can look at the story now and we can see God's timing is perfect. You see, God is never late, but he's also never early. He arrives precisely when he means to. His timing is perfect for the accomplishment of his plan and the good of his people. But often it's not the timing that we want. I think we get the fact that God is never late. I think we get that. We sometimes would say things like that. Oh yeah, God's never late. That's never late. But he's also never early, which means we have to wait on him. He arrives precisely when he means to, when everything is in the exact right place for his plan to work out perfectly. That means we often have to wait for the right timing. We might wish he would come early, but if he did that, we wouldn't be ready. The circumstances wouldn't be ready, and all the stuff that God is controlling wouldn't be perfectly ready. Right now, there are probably things you guys are waiting for. I don't know what they are. but you probably wish God would just make them happen right now. Yet let Joseph's story teach you that God is never late, but he's also never early. He's God, so he arrives precisely when he means to. Yet also be encouraged by that. The whole Bible shows us that the timing of God is absolutely perfect. Jesus, for example, arrives exactly in history at the right time to save his people and for the gospel to be able to spread and like wildfire throughout the world. If God had sent Jesus earlier, the Roman road system would not have been ready, and their control over the whole Mediterranean would not have been ready, and it would not have been the perfect timing for the gospel message to spread like wildfire. It might have died in Jerusalem with just a few hundred Christians. He arrived at precisely the right time for the gospel to be able to spread throughout the world. You see, he's never late, but he's also never early. He arrives precisely when he means to. You guys think about that, and I'll see you in the morning.